Welcome to Pop Cult, where we talk reality TV, celebrity chaos, and pop culture throwbacks. We are your hosts. I'm Avery.
And I'm Julia, and we post 2 episodes every week. Tuesdays are for Reality Digest, where we cover the previous week's reality TV moments and celebrity chaos. And Thursdays are the Fame Files, where we revisit defining stories throughout pop culture history.
Today is for the Fame Files, and we are talking about the death of Marilyn Monroe. More specifically, what sort of conspiracies surround her death and a little bit about her and her life towards the end of her life, unfortunately. I do want to disclaim with this episode that there is much, much more to this story in terms of historical information, and there are many historians who have done copious amounts of research into her life. And I will mention a few of the sources that I used in this episode, and I would highly encourage everyone to go and watch those documentaries or read those books because they're much more detailed than this episode. I was interested in the conspiracies surrounding her death, and so I wanted to do a little episode about it.
Love Marilyn Monroe, I will say. Her death makes me very, very sad just because it was so... We don't really know what happened, and we never will. Like, what I would give to be a fly on the wall.
Let's get into it. Marilyn Monroe was found tragically dead in her bedroom on August 5th, 1962, at the young age of 36. And a little bit about, obviously I would say most people know who she is, but I just think she was really the first, bombshell female celebrity on the scene. And she's remained so relevant even after her death.
I guess more back then they're referred to as, sex icons. But, she's just very much one of the first of a bombshell, if you will.
Yeah, I think she was just so ahead of her time, and she's still just remains so relevant. Why can I not say that word?
Relevant.
She still just remains so relevant posthumously. There is even a club called Marilyn Remembered, which was started by a man named Greg Schreiner, which he founded in 1983. There are also still professional Marilyn impersonators to this day. And just some little tidbits about her. She was always said to be a natural talent in front of the camera, and she even had her own production company through Fox, which I had no clue about, and I thought that was so interesting. And unfortunately, we're going to be in this episode, we're going to be talking a lot about a lot of just men and other people that were involved in her life, but because that's, just comes with her death, unfortunately. But I do want to just acknowledge that there's a lot more to her as a person. And maybe we'll do an episode on her life and legacy. But today we're talking about her death, which is one that has been tied to many conspiracy theories, such as the involvement of the current president at the time, John F. Kennedy, with whom she had a not so secret affair. And it's also been theorized that her death somehow is kind of linked to the Communist Party and also the mob separately, but could be tied to both, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I do just want to say there are several theories here. All of this is alleged. We're going to jump around a bit because all the theories are sort of intertwined.
Obviously, only people that know what happened are the people who were unfortunately involved and would never say what actually happened.
Exactly. And many of them are also no longer alive, so that makes things tricky. But alleged being the key word because no real conclusion was come to aside from the fact that her death was ruled a suicide. Spoiler. So let's get into how all of the conspiracies started. And all of these were kind of speculated on at the time of her death as well. But in 1982, the case of Marilyn's death was reopened. So 20 years after she died, they reopened the case. And while the cause of death was determined to be an overdose by way of sleeping pills, the circumstances surrounding her death were still somewhat of a mystery. Was it suicide? Was it murder? Was it an accident? And the mystery around her death seemed to mimic her persona in life. She was sort of this mysterious woman who was undeniably ahead of her time. But if you ask me, that probably had something to do with her premature death.
Very fair.
People don't like progress coming too fast
sometimes. No, they don't tend to. I would be curious, if this happened in our timeline with, Marilyn specifically, if we would even know more, because obviously we have, advancements in forensics and all of that jazz, but if the same thing would have just happened again and we would still.
Right. I know. Well, and it just, once we get into it more, it's like how many people were involved in this? Like, if any of those people are still alive today, like, could they be implicated? It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Is there a statute of limitations? I'm not really sure. I even found a newspaper clipping from August 18th, 1962, so about 2 weeks after her death, in the New York Times, called Marilyn Monroe's death is called suicide. So the coroner in Los Angeles ruled her death as a suicide due to an overdose of barbiturates, but toxicologists also found that she had a large dose of chloral hydrate in her system, which were at the time referred to as knockout drops.
Like in the sense that somebody would give those to you or you're taking them to knock yourself out.
I mean, I suppose it could be either way, but
Yeah.
I think the implication is that somebody gave them
Gave
to
them to
her to
her.
knock her out. Yeah. When she was found, there was an empty pill bottle lying next to her. But one thing to note is that the coroner ruled that her death was probably a suicide. And what's interesting about this is that over the last couple months leading up to her death, her psychiatrist said that they had been trying to work on reducing her usage of the drugs that she was taking, and she had actually been successful. So the combination of probably a suicide from the coroner and also the fact that her psychiatrist says that she was doing better raised suspicion that there might be something going on under the surface here other than her just overdosing on pills. Her relationship with her therapist slash psychiatrist, Dr. Greenson, was very odd and much too close for comfort between patient and doctor. She was very close with his family, and they also did have quite a bit of knowledge about the happenings the night that she died. So I think,
Uncomfy. I don't like that.
I know, and it does kind of beg the question, like, did Dr. Greenson have too much of an
Close.
optimistic outlook on her progress?
Yeah, but you, like, as a therapist, as a patient, you should know absolutely nothing about your psychiatrist.
Right. So it's kind of like, I mean, it does call his professionalism and his validity into question a
Yeah.
little bit. I will say that. Although she had struggled in the past with overusing drugs, sometimes to the point of attempted suicide, she suffered from mental health issues stemming from childhood, which we're not going to get into because that's like a whole other can of worms, but maybe we can do a separate episode about that. But these issues obviously followed her through her adulthood, as they normally do for so many people. But at the scene of her death, there was even reports that there was a rotary phone found nearby, suggesting that she may have tried to call for help, as she had before when she attempted to overdose. But ultimately, it was ruled probably a suicide, and they also performed a psychological autopsy, which is where they took a look at her lifestyle, behavior, and character traits to essentially come to a conclusion. I'm assuming because they just didn't have the means to physically prove it at the time. So this psychological autopsy was, I'm sure, talking to her doctors and evaluating her medical history, and that's kind of, in the circumstances in which she was found, that's kind of how they came to the conclusion that it was probably a suicide.
Okay.
However, Dr. Cyril Wecht, I think is how you say that. I don't know. Sorry to this man. He is a forensic psychologist, and he says in the documentary Marilyn Monroe Declassified, which I would highly recommend you watch because it's very detailed and it does actually talk a lot about her as sort of a rising star. But he says that out of the thousands of autopsy death certificates that he's signed off on, he has never once seen one that stated probably suicide.
Except for hers.
Except for hers. The doctor also states that because of the mysterious, uncertain circumstances surrounding her death, that the coroner should have called for a grand jury, but he did not.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
Sorry.
A grand jury is like
I know what it means in like a.
So in this context, I think what the grand jury would have been called for was to decide whether or not there was enough evidence to rule her death as a potential homicide.
So essentially just consulting other coroners?
Yes, or even looking at suspects to bring up an investigation on.
Okay.
Something like that. But yeah, it's basically, a grand jury is when you issue an indictment. So they're investigating the documents, they're talking to witnesses to see if there's any grounds to move forward or if the coroner can
Okay.
just rule this death as a suicide and there was no other involvement. But these two things alone were enough to make people raise an eyebrow about the initial cause of the death ruling. So take a look at her life about a year leading up to her death. In 1961, she told reporters that she felt wonderful as they bombarded her as she left a psychiatric center after staying for a few days to get help for her drug issues. Which, like, why are the reporters bombarding a woman leaving a mental hospital? Like,
They're everywhere.
that's crazy work. Based on the information that I found, it seems like the year of 1961 was kind of like the beginning of a very slow death for Marilyn. She was fresh off of her second divorce as of January of that year, and JFK was in office as the president. I read a couple different places that she had relations with the Kennedy family since the 1950s. And then it sort of seems to wind down as she was married to her first two husbands and then picked back up after that second divorce. Because I think that they were in that sort of political realm, obviously.
So she died in 60. Sorry, 2. Okay, and then JFK died in 63.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's unrelated. I was just curious.
No, you're good. It seems like JFK would visit her in LA because at the time he was just a senator, so he wasn't super duper recognizable. But with the spread of the media and
Well,
not being
the
what it is today,
president of the United States. It's hard to.
yeah, it just would have been easier to get away with because of, the media is just not the same as it is
Yeah.
today. The Kennedy brothers would also attend parties that Marilyn would throw at a friend's house. And it's important to note that there were many people and news platforms that were actively searching for dirt on the brothers since they had been hot on the political scene. And that brings me to the first theory, which is the Kennedys' involvement. And all of them are sort of linked to the Kennedys' involvement in some way.
Yeah.
But some of it's maybe a stretch. I don't know. Regardless, it's widely believed and more than likely that the Kennedy family had involvement in her death, regardless of any theory. So we're just going to talk about the high level details of all of it. According to The Mystery of Marilyn Monroe, The Unheard Tapes, which is the main source that I used for this episode, and it's much more in depth than this episode, so I would highly recommend watching the full thing on Netflix. The wife and daughter of Marilyn's psychiatrist said that she would chat with him about a new man that she was seeing and referred to him as the general. And she called him this because at the time, this man that she was speaking of was the Attorney General of the United States. And based on what at least I knew about Marilyn Monroe's affair, you might think that the general refers to John F. Kennedy, but it actually refers to his brother, Robert Kennedy.
Well, I didn't know this was the Vampire Diaries. I actually had
No, you're so
truly,
right.
I did not know that it wasn't just JFK.
You're so right about that. Oh my God. This is like the Kennedy brothers walked so David and Seven could run.
Then Conrad and Jeremiah.
Oh my God. So they could fly, I guess. So yeah, this was something new for me. I didn't realize that she had a relationship with both brothers.
New for me too, but go off, girl. Queen.
Yeah, it was definitely a shock. It is said that the brothers had someone in their social circle whose role, whether official or unofficial, I'm not sure, was quote pimping for both the Kennedys.
Oh my God.
Meaning both brothers, obviously. And there are sources that suggest that the brothers were sharing her, and supposedly there are tapes that exist of Marilyn with both brothers, if you catch my drift.
Crazy.
This man is supposedly Peter Lawford, the Kennedys' brother-in-law and an actor at the time, and his name sort of continues to pop up throughout this story. And I think it's interesting because this involvement that she had with the brothers was sort of an open secret because many people knew what was going on. If I am, thinking about her death from outside of the conspiracy of it all, I can see why they made some of the decisions that they did solely because of the fact that it was known that she had a relationship with the two of them. So less so that they're trying to cover up that they murdered her or had something to do with it, and more so just trying to cover up any sort of relation because they didn't want to be tied to this scandal as their political figures. According to Darwin Porter, a former employee of Senator George Smathers, self-proclaimed as JFK's BFF, He would openly talk about his friend's affair with her. And so, yeah, her and Marilyn's former hairdresser says that she was always on the phone with JFK when he would do her hair. So it just appears that this was sort of like the worst kept secret of all at the time, with many people being aware of her relationships and privy to her interactions with the two brothers. According to that same documentary, Robert Kennedy was actually with Marilyn Monroe when she died, which we will get into more.
Oh my God.
The theory about the Kennedys is the catalyst for more specific theories that we'll talk about at the high level details of. And I was kind of under the impression that the US government just didn't want this to leak for purposes of maintaining their image, but it is much more complex than that, because there was even speculation. This is a lesser known theory. There was speculation that Marilyn Monroe knew government secrets because apparently JFK also told her info about aliens and UFOs. And a former boyfriend of Marilyn's named Jose Bolanos claimed that she told him something shocking that would one day shock the world.
Well, why is he keeping it to himself then?
I know. I mean, he could just be a big fat fake. You
Yeah.
never know. A man named Mike Rothmiller, former LAPD intelligence officer, found an intelligence doc from the CIA regarding this conversation about aliens and UFOs, and his verdict is that he was telling her the truth. This would confirm that the Roswell, New Mexico incident actually did occur, and this document was written and distributed on August 3rd, 1962, 2 days before her death. So if I'm reading between the lines here, she knew government secrets because he was a blabbermouth and didn't think that she would do anything with them, but she did. And also other people knew that he said things to her, and now there's a document about it, and now it gets distributed, and then she dies 2 days later.
No, I don't like that.
Crazier things have happened. So that's kind of the setup for the Kennedys. I feel like that's important to set up front because they continue to be a ribbon throughout the rest of this. So according to her housekeeper, at around 8 p.m. on August 4th, Marilyn went into her room and closed the door. And then after 3 a.m., the light was still on and the door was locked. So the housekeeper called her psychiatrist, Dr. Grinson, who found a window and saw her face down and dead on the bed, allegedly. They called police at 4:25 a.m., so almost an hour and a half after they found her. Of course, if 3 a.m. is actually an accurate recollection, like that's really weird to wait an hour and 25 minutes.
Yeah, that's.
I have to believe that they had good intentions. Like maybe they thought she would just wake up, or again, maybe 3 a.m. is not even an accurate recollection of this.
Yeah.
There are many, many people involved in the night of the murder. It genuinely, this is like a sloppy comparison, but it reminds me sometimes of the first episode of Pretty Little Liars.
How much Allison did that night?
Yes, like there's just so many people involved, and it's like, how does nobody know what happened to this girl? You know, it's crazy. But then Marilyn Monroe's PR rep, a guy named Arthur Jacobs, is said to have been at her house much earlier than 3:30 when the psychiatrist supposedly arrived. According to his wife, Natalie, she says that her husband was contacted around 10:30 at the Hollywood Bowl, which is like a performance venue in LA.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming it still probably is, and her husband went straight to Marilyn's house and Natalie went home. She insists that her husband was there, even though the report states that the only two people who were there were the psychiatrist, Dr. Greenson, and the housekeeper, Eunice. She says her husband hid these details to keep the press off of the case. So there could have been a third party there. And someone who worked for Arthur Jacobs named Juliet made a written report that says that he went to Marilyn's house at 11 p.m. on August 4th. And remember, the housekeeper said that she went into her room at 8 p.m. And that she was in there until the housekeeper checked on her at 3 a.m. because she noticed that the lights were still on. So what exactly happened between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m.? I fear we will never know, but we can do our best.
So disappointing.
Right. The DA was contacted by an EMT named Ken Hunter that said he went to Marilyn's house that night and saw her, and that they actually took her to the hospital while she was still alive but not conscious. Multiple people corroborated this. Dr. Greenson told people that she died in the ambulance and then it turned around and brought her body back. They did not talk about what happened the weekend she died because he didn't want his family to have to hide anything or lie because they were somewhat involved in this instance of them putting her in the ambulance. She dies and then they take her back to her house. Crazy. So who was actually at the house and for what reason? Bill Woodfield, a photographer and journalist, suggests that finding out Bobby Kennedy's Robert slash Bobby Kennedy's location would be revealing. And Dr. Greenson even said on tape, talk to Bobby Kennedy, and nobody ever did.
That's weird.
But a law enforcement informant named Harry Hall heard that Bobby was in town that weekend he heard this from a FBI agent, and multiple people knew that he was in town with his brother-in-law Peter Lawford. He says there wasn't technically an FBI case on her, but they were aware of the situation, and I'm guessing regardless they had people kind of keeping an eye on her.
Yeah.
This sort of contradicts some other accounts that there were absolutely FBI and CIA cases on her, but I doubt that they were going around and spreading that information willingly. Supposedly, Bobby had an alibi for the night of her death, but there was a declassified document that implicates him in her death. The Freedom of Information Act states that the US government is required to release classified documents after a certain amount of time. And basically, the Freedom of Information Act states that the US government is required to release classified documents after a certain amount of time. Attorney John Bates states that RFK was visiting him when Marilyn's death was announced, and that there was no way that he could have been in LA. So we have multiple people saying that they were with him, that he couldn't have been in LA, but then a former Beverly Hills police officer named Lynn Franklin said that he pulled over Peter Lawford, the brother-in-law, for speeding, and RFK was in the back seat.
Oh my God, of course.
And they said that they were trying to get RFK to his hotel to get his luggage so he could leave LA.
Because he just watched Marilyn Monroe die.
Allegedly. Potentially. We should say. And even Eunice, Marilyn's housekeeper, confirms in her book that RFK was in LA with Marilyn in the afternoon before her death. This is an eyewitness account, and I think that this means that this was before he was pulled over that night with Peter Lawford. So this is all happening on August 4th, the day and night of August 4th.
It's too much.
So the theory here is that police and county officials covered up the circumstances around her death to protect RFK.
Of course.
So that's sort of, again, weaving into that same theory of their involvement. There was even a eavesdropping operative slash surveillance expert named Reed Wilson who says that it's basically bullshit that people think she was murdered, but that Bobby Kennedy did call Marilyn that night and she basically told him to F off, and that she was not in a good state of mind. She was calling the White House and complaining because of this weird ancestral love triangle going on, and she was feeling used, not heartbroken, but she wanted out. She no longer wanted to be associated with the brothers. But this man whose job is to eavesdrop and surveil is basically saying he didn't murder her, but like just coincidentally they did have a conversation earlier in the day, and she's kind of calling it off. And Eunice, the housekeeper, kind of just confirms exactly what Marilyn is saying. Like, it just was becoming very messy and people were having to step in on behalf of Bobby Kennedy, and it's like at that point it's just not worth it. There are also helicopter flight records that night that show Bobby on a flight from LA to San Francisco, and they were going to run a story on that, but the press was contacted by Bobby's liaison requesting that the story did not run.
Of course.
Reed Wilson, the surveillance expert, was hired to clear or to have someone clear anything in her house that would implicate the Kennedys, like diaries or any note correspondence, any evidence that they were anything other than just public figures that knew each other. And Peter was audibly upset when he found out about her death, crying and saying that he should have gone up there and should have known better. Whatever that means.
What does that mean, Peter?
Like, why was he... It's, like, interesting if they're trying to cover all this up. Like, why was he so emotional? Like, if they're painting the picture that they didn't even know each other very well, etc. But there was only one photo that was found of the three of them from a party for JFK at Madison Square Garden, which was taken by a picture agency that fronted as the FBI. The actual photo was taken by an agency that said they were the FBI. And law enforcement supposedly took recordings of her with the brothers. One fun fact that I'm going to throw in here, I think that in the photograph that I saw, she's wearing the dress that Kim Kardashian wore to the Met in 2022.
It seems to be.
It looks
I
similar.
just looked up the photo.
Yeah. But don't quote me on that because it's like a black and white photo, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So, like I said, the Kennedys are weaved throughout this entire story. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the Communist Party involvement. And this to me is kind of like, it feels like a stretch, but I also think it's actually like a really good theory on why the Kennedys like would have wanted to silence her. So you might be wondering why the Communist Party gets tied in, and it is by way of suspicion that Marilyn Monroe had some sort of ties or relation to the Communist Party for a few different reasons. And this was basically once this information sort of surfaced, or at least the brothers were made aware of this, it was basically the beginning of the end because their hands were tied at that point. They were in the midst of the Cold War. The fear of communists in America and communist spies was rampant. It was like the worst thing that you could be called was a communist.
Yeah.
And of course, again, there's more about this story about communism, but I am not going to claim to be an expert on communism. So, again, resources are linked. There was even an FBI file on Marilyn relating her to communism because of her second husband who was supposedly a communist. So, this theory definitely does have legs. I mean, there was an FBI file on her. They definitely thought that she could have been involved in some way, shape, or form. A Cold War was in progress, and a few months before her death, there was a document showing that Marilyn had gone on a trip with some friends who were known to be communists and had literally been kicked out of America because of their potential communist relations. And she had been talking to these people allegedly about political conversations that she had with Robert Kennedy. She had a conversation with Bobby about the morality and use of nuclear weapons and nuclear testing, and it is said that she was very leftist about it, which in the context of this time frame means that she was very much against it. He then went to visit a nuclear testing site right after his visit. So the theory is that because they had been discussing it with her, that she now knows that they are testing nuclear weapons. And they started freaking out that she was going to leak info to her communist friends.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly thereafter, she was told never to contact them again, and a source close to her says that that's what killed her, and from then on out she started heavily drinking and abusing pills again. But then we also have the recollection that she was feeling just used in this relation but not heartbroken, that she just wanted out.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that we're sort of getting those contradicting statements, I guess. She is also said to have given her opinions on Cuba and the Communist Party and the many things going on politically, and she would share these opinions with the Kennedys, which, like, I love that she's has like her own opinions, and she's like, I don't care if you're the president of the United States, I'm still going to tell you how I feel about
How I feel.
her ex-husband Arthur Miller was a communist and even wrote for the communist newspaper. So the evidence is stacking up that she may have had some involvement in the Communist Party, because when she was in Mexico City on that trip that I mentioned earlier, she was hanging out with a Vanderbilt heir who was also a known communist. One theory in relation to the communist of it all is that Marilyn Monroe could have been trying to give a press conference and share the details that JFK gave her about these government secrets, whatever they may have been. I guess the theory is that she was talking about it and they heard it through a wiretap, and then the CIA decided that they needed to get rid of her.
Wow.
So that's kind of why I feel like this theory is a little bit of a stretch, because I'm not sure, she doesn't seem to me like the type of person that would seek revenge by way of releasing government secrets.
Yeah, that's fair.
Or even seek revenge at all. Because what good is that going to do to her? She knows that those men are more powerful than her.
Yeah. She's not stupid.
No, not at all. So that's kind of the communist theory. And then there is the involvement of the mob, which anytime I hear something about the mob, it just always feels so fictional to me. But I know that it's not. I know they exist. I struggle with it. Like, how do they know who's in the mob? I thought you weren't supposed to know who was in the mob. I don't know. So, with the whole mob involvement of it all, Dr. Greenson, her psychiatrist, was worried that she might get involved with somebody or something that would impact her negatively. Enter Jimmy Hoffa, a mafia man out of, I think, Chicago, leader of the Teamsters or Truckers Union in the US, and supposedly a very powerful man. Robert Kennedy, as Attorney General at the time, had been questioning this man and his corruption, and so they hated each other. Like, basically, he knew that he was running the mob. So, Robert Kennedy was out to get him. Of course, there's much more to this story, but since this episode is about her death, I'm going to kind of give the high level details, but to give a little context into the scenario, to show how ingrained these men were in so many different situations that you could contribute to some of the conspiracy theories surrounding her death. Because ultimately, you become part of the story to those you're associated with. So when her psychiatrist is saying, I'm worried she's going to get involved with someone that's going to harm her or that's going to cause detriment, it's kind of like, even though she wasn't directly related to these mob members, she's having relations with two of the most powerful men in the world, and one of which is currently questioning a mob member.
Yep.
So Robert Kennedy was essentially prosecuting Hoffa for his crimes. Enter a private investigator named John Danoff, who says that there were bugs installed all over her house. Like, they were wiring her phone. They were allegedly listening to her talk to JFK, who in 1961 was obviously the current president, at what appeared to be a party at her home. There was music and voices, so they were making plans to meet up with each other, meaning Marilyn with JFK and Robert. So keep in mind, music and other voices could have compromised that a little bit. But the theory is that the mob wired her house on behalf of Hoffa because he was trying to get the dirt on JFK and RFK.
Dang, nobody will leave her the fuck alone.
I know. So it's like she's literally getting caught in the middle of like these men in their, for lack of a better word, arguments.
Yeah.
And she is just becoming like an innocent party in this. And I think it just speaks to the hypocrisy in the world of politics, because Hoffa clearly has dirt on the brothers or thinks he can get some. So it's like bold of Robert Kennedy to be prosecuting this mob leader for his crimes when like also he's probably doing things that he's not supposed to.
Yeah.
So I mean, who knows the gravity of each of their actions, but just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
The significance of the mob in this story is that it was well known that the mob helped JFK get elected, but then he then sent RFK as Attorney General after the mob and attempt to get rid of organized crime. So he used the mob to help get him into office, and then now he's saying like, actually, we can't be having organized crime in this country.
Yeah.
So there's that. I mean, not saying that this is why he was assassinated, but I did see and read a little bit of speculation on that. But this is not about him. There is also speculation that the mob involvement actually may have been the exact opposite of this, which is that they could have been recruited to kill her, maybe as revenge or to send a message of some sort. The mob wiretappers tapped her home when she was in Mexico. Jimmy Hoffa has literally admitted this. They also wiretapped Peter Lawford, their brother-in-law.
Yeah.
And after Marilyn died, the couple who bought the house was doing renovations and found significant evidence of wiretapping.
That's crazy. I mean, imagine you're not safe anywhere.
I know. You're not even in your own home.
No.
Another mobster named, I'm going to butcher this, but Sam Giancana, I guess. His brother and grandson wrote a book claiming that the mob murdered Marilyn Monroe at the request of the CIA. So to back up a little bit, when I say that this could have been the mob could have been involved in the opposite way.
Yeah.
It would have been the CIA were some sort of government entity, most likely not even the brothers that were enlisting the mob for this, because it was known that the mob and the government had her under surveillance. The brother and the godson claim that they taped her mouth and gave her a suppository that acted as a sedative. Another theory is that Sam from the mob would kill Marilyn Monroe, make it look like a suicide, and then when the police showed up, they would find letters and tapes exposing the Kennedy brothers, thus taking them down. But whoever cleaned up behind the brothers got there first. So there's that. So obviously, while all this is going on, like, they've called an ambulance, they're calling police, and so this is just a little bit of a recount of what some of the law enforcement on scene was thinking or what they know. The first officer on the scene that night that she died was named Jack Clemens, and he is the one that actually found her body, and he instantly found a few things to be unusual. One of these things was her housekeeper was doing laundry when she died, and there was even speculation that Eunice could have been a spy.
A spy for
But
the mob or like the
what?
CIA?
Maybe a spy for the government.
Okay. Eunice.
I know, but I will say there's not much to back this claim up. So I'm not going to slander Eunice like that.
Yeah.
All right, so we're not going to slander Eunice for potentially being
Never.
a spy.
So sorry.
And she has also written a book. So if anyone's interested in her perspective on all of this, then go support our
Read
girl
up.
Eunice. For real. Maybe suggest it to your book club. There was also another thing that Jack Clemens found to be unusual is that there was also no water or a glass anywhere in her surroundings. So his initial thought is like, how did she swallow all of these pills?
That is crazy because I mean, I struggle enough to swallow one pill.
Oh my gosh, I gag on one of my pills every day.
And like, yes, she
I have to take it with apple
probably had
juice.
a little bit more practice, seeing as she had a little bit of a problem.
Sure.
But what do you get thirsty?
I know.
There's
He
only
also
so much
said,
saliva.
Do what?
There's only so much saliva, you know?
I know. Yeah. Ew. He also said that there should have been vomit somewhere if she had really overdosed to the extent that they ruled.
Ooh, that's crazy.
I know.
Why is nobody listening to him?
So he was very vocal about his thoughts on her death and the circumstances surrounding it. He believes that it was a murder
Yeah.
orchestrated by the LA district attorney, the coroner's office, and the police department to conceal the murder and pass it off as a suicide.
No.
I know. It's like, what do you do when it's an inside job?
There's
Like,
nothing you
that's
can.
crazy.
That's terrible.
It's so scary. One of the deputy coroner aides in Los Angeles named Lionel Grandison states that there was absolutely a cover up. He signed her death certificate. His role is to literally make sure that there is nothing missing from the death certificate that could refute the claims being made. And when he went searching for missing info, he was told it was not his place to ask questions and to simply sign it. This is something that I did not know, but apparently there were actually 2 coroner's reports, which is an immediate tip-off that there was a cover-up, because when someone dies, there can only be one.
How does that work? Like, how were there even 2?
I'm guessing there was the one that Lionel was refuting, and then maybe they had a different coroner write up another one to just sign, seal, deliver it neatly. There were also no microscopic slides done in the examination of the body, which is apparently a really important step in an autopsy. And the police files were also destroyed in compliance with police department procedures. So we can't even like see the details of like, you know, maybe the police that showed up on this scene, like they might have not even known that it was her home. Like they might have not even known about her involvement in all of these different government entities. Like, so they could have been completely just writing down what they see, and that could solve so much, but the files are destroyed. There are theories that the details of her death were hidden because she was murdered, but this evidence is all circumstantial and there is no hard evidence of this. However, the circumstances were covered up on purpose, likely due to her connection to the brothers, but not necessarily because they ordered it. So going back to the very beginning, why, you know, all these conspiracies keep getting brought up is because in 1982, they reopened the case, but the courts ruled that her cause of death was still an accidental suicide, just as it was ruled in 1962. And once again, in 1993, reopened her case. A private investigator named Milo Spiriglio, I'm guessing is how you pronounce that, had written 2 books on her death, speculating that she was a victim of a contract killing. And because of his books, the City Council of LA reopened the case, and they decided that there was probable cause. But then the foreman in charge of making this announcement was fired, and the grand jury was dismantled. Later, it was revealed that she had been wiretapped and that JFK had been revealing national security secrets and info to her. She had even asked about a recent hydrogen bomb test in Nevada, and she was supposedly threatening to go public and about the way they treated her. Ultimately, even with all of this, they could not prove otherwise, so her cause of death still remains probably a suicide. And those are the many theories attached to the speculation around Marilyn Monroe's death.
That's crazy. And it's just so sad.
I know. It sucks that it just feels like a lot of an abuse of power, and it all could have been avoided if the people involved in her life would have just not had an affair.
Yep, sounds about right. This article says that it's alleged that her body went missing for 6 hours post being taken from her house to get the autopsy. But these articles are saying that it was like tampered with in some way, as in like the contents of her stomach was completely destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is, like we were talking about earlier, like what was going on between the hours of 11 a.m. and 3 a.m. Like, I definitely think that that could be what they were doing.
But yeah, definitely crazy stuff, which is kind of what I was saying, is like you have no control over your body once.
Yeah.
And if there's no one there on your side to speak for you, and it doesn't really feel like she had anyone.
Yeah, I mean, it even feels like her psychiatrist was sort of complicit in
Yeah, absolutely.
just taking away her lack of autonomy at that point. Like, yeah, it was, I just, like, you want to believe that stuff like this doesn't happen within the government, but I fear that it probably does.
Yeah, sad.
But you didn't hear it from me.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you on Tuesday for Reality Digest.
Go forth and gossip.
XOXO. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next week for more pop culture chaos. The stories we cover are based on research and publicly available sources. While we strive for accuracy, some details may be disputed or unverified, and this episode is for entertainment and informational purposes only.